Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever in the world you are connecting from today. Thank you so much for being part of our Hacking HR live chat series. We've done this for the past 3 months, and it's been incredibly exciting to talk with so many incredible, talented, brilliant authors that are part of our live chats as my guests. And if you have missed any of the sessions that we've had before, any of the chats that we've had before, just go to our website. All of them are posted in there, hackinghr.io. Click on live chats. They are not live anymore, of course, because they are recorded in that case, but you can check them out. We have great, great conversations in there. And very exciting series of chats that we've had. And we have an incredible agenda lined up for the following weeks and months. So I'm hoping that you continue to join us in this series of conversations. And I don't know if you have noticed, for those of you who have joined most of the live chats that we've had, I am putting a lot of energy and effort into bringing conversations about all things mental health, well-being, wellness. Not that I don't care about the other things that we need to be talking about in HR. I still bring some of those conversations to the table. But to me, all things that have to do with mental health, with wellness, well-being, and this today is part of that sort of series of conversations, are incredibly powerful, relevant, and very timely, not only for HR people as they themselves are burned out and suffering from mental health challenges of the kind of work that we're doing and the all the things that have been put on our plates with the same level of resources, by the way, and how that is burning us out. But at the same time, because of our role in creating a culture that prevents this from happening in the organization and for other people. So that's why I've been putting so much energy and effort into making sure that most of the conversations that we have in this series are about mental health, wellness, and well-being, and this is one of them. So I hope you enjoy the conversation and all the other chats that we've had. Please post in the chat. Let us know where you are connecting from. It would be amazing to know. I already see people from all over the world. So please keep it coming. If you have any questions during the chat, please post it in the chat. I'm going to try to keep an eye on that as well. And I encourage you all to interact with us, with the audience in the live chat. For those of you who are watching the replays, of course, you can interact, but I'm hoping that you are getting a lot of great insights out of this conversation. So I am super excited about this next conversation about harnessing the power of your anxiety. That sounds, when I first read that, I was like, well, I'm interested in this. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but I want to find out more. I want to know what this is about. I want to know what nervous energy is all about. So I am super excited to welcome Dr. Chloe to the chat. I'm going to bring you to the screen. Good morning. How are you doing?
Hi, good morning, Enrique. It's great to be with you. And good morning to your community, your global community. What an impressive community. I mean, so many people from so many cultures and places.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is always exciting because the messaging that we're sharing, it might be the one insight that you are sharing with the community, but it's seen and perceived in many different ways by everybody connecting from so many different places. And I'm hoping that we talk a little bit about that as well in the conversation. But Dr. Chloe, I would love for you to please introduce yourself to our community. Please let us know more about you, who you are, what do you work on, where are you connecting from if you want to share that, and more about what nervous energy, harnessing the power of your anxiety, is all about.
Sure. Thanks, Enrique. So, I am a clinical psychologist by training. And of course, I'm also an author of Nervous Energy, Harness the Power of Your Anxiety. And I'm also an entrepreneur and an employer. So, I've dealt with HR issues myself within my own business sometimes. And I'm also doing a lot of speaking now, a lot of speaking for law firms and financial firms and other types of places where people are interested in helping employees to reframe anxiety, to understand it's not always about a disorder. That's kind of getting to the nervous energy piece here,
Mm.
that there's actually a healthy function to anxiety, which is to stimulate preparation behaviors. So my book is about 9 practical techniques that people can do that. And my experience as a psychologist is that it actually helps people to stay out of the disordered space with anxiety when they know how to use it effectively. Just like somebody who knows how to be assertive when there's a conflict is less likely to develop an anger management problem because
Mm.
they know how to deal with it and use it constructively at lower levels.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I want to begin by asking you sort of this question related to any changes that you have seen around anxiety levels in society over the past, maybe say the past 3 years. Have you seen more anxiety? Is it that we are not ready to perhaps manage the more chaotic conditions that are creating those anxiety levels? What have you seen when it comes to anxiety over the past perhaps 3 years since the pandemic?
Yeah, well, it's I'm glad you mentioned the pandemic. So, statistically, we know that anxiety cases have completely skyrocketed. And I do think that the pandemic has had a lot to do with that. First of all, just source of stress and concern about some of the issues directly from the pandemic, but also a decrease in social support,
Mm.
some economic turbulence. A lot of those things have happened. Also, kind of on the positive side, there's been a big movement to destigmatize mental health
Mm.
issues. So I think, some of it may just be people that had an anxiety issue before and they're feeling more free to come out and talk about it now, which is great. But I always want to try to balance that with saying, we want to be able to come out and talk about mental health issues and we want to be able to accept them, but we also want to understand that we do want to move beyond them. We do
Yeah.
want to be solution focused. There's a fine line between accepting and grappling with something versus stagnating with something. And I try to be on the moving forward side.
Yeah, and just like following up on that last idea you shared, harnessing the power of your anxiety, right? When I said before, it sounds counterintuitive. It What I mean is that you hear and you see people saying, there's something wrong with you. There's if you are anxious or if anxiety is impacting in quote unquote a negative way your life or the work you do, there's something wrong with you. Here's a pill, go to the therapist, go to the doctor, do this, do that. And now we have this. By the way, I also interviewed somebody yesterday which was talking about the positive side of anxiety. So it's been really interesting to have guests and to have authors like you talking about harnessing the power of anxiety. So can you tell us more about what it means to harness the power of anxiety, especially in the context of society telling you there's something wrong with you if you are anxious?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's so important to do that because otherwise we get anxiety about anxiety, right?
Yeah.
Where it snowballs. So let's suppose, for example, that you have a big meeting tomorrow and there's a lot of pressure around this meeting, a lot of potential outcomes that you really want to happen, and you're feeling anxious about it. You don't want to then go get anxious about feeling anxious because it becomes a complete distraction. What that also does is it stops you from using your anxious energy on what you should be, which is to stimulate you to prepare for the meeting. And instead, you waste all that extra adrenaline and energy just, fixating on the fact of the anxiety if you have a belief that anxiety, by definition is always wrong or bad.
Mm.
I mean, anxiety is kind of unique that way. So, for example, with other psychological issues, like, say, hallucinations or delusions, there's no healthy function to that, right? As soon as you realize you have a hallucination or a delusion, you do want to take steps to try to get rid of it. Whereas with anxiety, again, there's a healthy function to it. At certain levels, we're supposed to have it there because it tickles us and stimulates us to say, okay, maybe I should create an outline for that presentation. Maybe I should run through it with a friend. Maybe there are preparation steps that I can take. So that's why anxiety is really unique, because sometimes it's in what we call the pathological space, a disordered space, it's too much. But there's also places where it's absolutely appropriate. It's nothing to be alarmed about. It's supposed to be there. Sometimes I compare it to somebody who might want to say, I want to get rid of all my body fat. How do I
Mm.
get rid of fat? Right. Whereas the truth is, we don't want to get rid of all of our body fat. We're supposed to have a certain amount of it because it serves a healthy purpose for us at a certain level.
Yeah. So I'm hearing that it's not about learning to live with anxiety, which is an intrinsic part of who we are as humans, but it's leveraging on that anxiety to do things, to make things happen, harnessing, like the title of your book, harness the power of that nervous energy. And I would love for you to define what nervous energy, what anxious energy mean.
Sure. Yeah. So I wanted to find a way to help people understand what I mean when I talk about the healthy space of anxiety. And so, nervous energy to me is kind of a just an everyday phrase that I think people can understand. When you feel that kind of keyed up, a little bit excited, a little extra energy, those are some of the symptoms of anxiety, is like a racing heart, sweaty
Mhm.
palms, fast thoughts. That is energy that we get when we're a little nervous about something. And if you think about it, it's actually good news to get energy when you have a challenge coming up or something that's making you nervous. The goal is to make sure that we point that energy constructively and methodically and strategically upon whatever it is that's making us nervous.
Yeah, I love that. Now you work with a lot of successful but very stressed folks, right? And then before they work with you, they may be thinking, I want to get rid of this fat, meaning I want to get rid of this anxiety. I want to get rid of the things that make me nervous. I don't want to be that way. And there comes Dr. Chloe telling them, wait a second, let's leverage on that. Let's use it as a springboard. How do you approach those conversations? Because what you're telling them, for them, it is like you are trying to make me follow a different path than what I thought I should be doing to get rid of this anxiety. How do you approach then those conversations?
Well, believe it or not, Enrique, a lot of them actually, I think on some level have an awareness of this,
Mm,
because they would come to my office asking for help, with their anxiety, but they would also kind of joke about a little bit of an attachment to it. They'd say, well, I've always been a little bit OCD, or I'm kind of a perfectionist. And I could tell that they wanted to make sure that I, as a psychologist, was not just going to teach them a bunch of relaxation exercises and make them lose their edge. They were aware that
mm,
there's this extra level of conscientiousness and this extra drive that they had, but that on some level it had just kind of gotten out of proportion to the point
mm,
where the anxiety was running them instead of them running the anxiety. At least a lot of them would have some awareness that maybe there was something about this anxiety that was giving them an edge. Some of them, to your point, really had no idea. Some of them were actually quite ashamed of it. They
mm.
thought that their anxiety was this, secret defect about them. And so when
Wow.
I explained to them, a person without anxiety wouldn't even look both ways before they cross the street. They wouldn't prepare for meetings at all. So, the fact that you do have anxiety on a certain level is actually a good thing. We're just going to teach you how to use it a little bit more judiciously.
Is there a threshold between that sort of functional anxiety that you're describing, and I don't even know if this is a thing, but dysfunctional anxiety, when you're like, now the anxiety is running me and I can't even make decisions because I'm not crossing the street, I'm just looking both ways all the time. Is there sort of a threshold that people can identify in, especially those that are listening to this right now?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, when it's starting to interfere with your daily life, right? So, suppose that instead of being able to think constructively about that meeting coming up and your anxiety and how that can drive you to prepare for it, instead, you're anxious about something from 10 years ago that you have no power to even do
Mm.
anything about. Or instead of double checking your notes for that big meeting, you're double checking a grocery list that you already double checked 10 times, and there's no real reason for it. It's like that anxious energy, that nervous energy is just going haywire, bouncing around without a target. Now, that would be a sign, of course, that you're not, using it the right way. The question I think you are getting at is, how do you know when you need a therapist, or how do you
Mm.
know when you need professional help? And I would say, if you first of all have tried self-help, right? Because a lot of times people just they have that problem I described of their nervous energy being all over the place, but they may not need therapy. They may just need self-help, like say my book, Nervous Energy, or other ways of thinking about how they can apply and shape their energy more appropriately, learning some relaxation exercises,
Mm.
whatever might be missing for them. If they try self help and that's not working, then don't hesitate to get some
Yeah.
professional help, of course. And certainly, if you're ever having thoughts of hurting yourself or others, don't even do self help. I would go right in for the professional help in that situation, of course.
Now, for the people that they understand the functional side of anxiety, right? That for them, the question is not how to cope with anxiety, it's how to use that anxiety
Yes.
on your for your benefit, right? So even that, we have to destigmatize the word cope, because even cope means there's something wrong with you, even if it's at a functional level. How can they then manage that anxiety when it's on the functional side of the spectrum? How can they manage that effectively for their benefit? How can they harness that energy? What are your tips, your
Yeah.
strategies?
Sure. Yeah. And I love the way you're putting that, right? It's not about necessarily coping, it's about
Yeah.
using. Like if I said, "Gee, I have $1 million in my bank account. How can I cope with that?" Right? Like as if it's a problem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the matter is more, how can I use that? How can I
Yeah.
springboard it? I have a resource. So, for example, let's say that you have this meeting that's coming up and you have that anxiety and you use it to prepare for the meeting, which is great, but then the meeting happens and it's over, and your brain still just keeps ruminating and thinking about the meeting. The
Mm.
first question, of course, is to say, all right, is there something that this anxiety is stimulating me to learn from the situation to help me better prepare for next time? Where you kind of think about what went well, what could you do better, etc. Let's say you've done all that, but you're still just thinking about it. And it's just a residual dead end topic, but you still have a lot of mental energy around it.
Yeah.
I would then go to a technique from my book. The technique is called the mental shortlist. And what we
Mm.
do in that one is we say, okay, I have a cognitive habit of just automatically going on to this old dead end topic that no longer serves me. So, what I'm going to do, instead of saying, don't think about that topic anymore, which is like saying, don't think about pink elephants, it just causes you to think about that topic. We give ourselves 5 other things instead that we know are going to be good uses of our mental energy. So we don't beat ourselves up. We say, wow, this is awesome. My brain has so much extra mental energy. This is fabulous. How can I use it well? I'm going to come up with 5 things, like say it could be anything from birthday and holiday shopping to writing
Mm.
thank you notes to people that helped you to prepare for that meeting, to prospecting for your next outbounds, if you want to set up some more meetings, making plans with your spouse. I encourage the mental shortlist that you prepare to have a wide range of things on it, so that at any given moment when the thought monster strikes and you want to go ruminate on that old topic, there'll be something good and tempting, juicy on your mental shortlist that you can go to instead. Now, I do
Mm.
encourage people, it's very important to actually write or type your mental shortlist out. The reason is because when we get under anxiety, our vision becomes more narrow. Even our physical vision becomes more
Wow.
narrow. This is kind of a holdover from the caveman days when we thought we had to laser in on a threat. And what that means is that when we want to broaden our perspective or pivot away onto other topics, it's harder to do that when we're mentally tight about a certain topic. So write down those 5 topics. And then whenever you feel yourself ruminating on the old topic, just point your eyeballs at your good list and then choose something. Now, I will say you only have permission to use the mental short list when you've really made sure that there's no healthy, constructive reason that the
Yeah.
other topic is on your mind, that there's no preparation or learning steps.
Or a
If you
lion in
know
front
it's
of you.
truly a dead end topic, then go ahead with the mental short list and use that energy constructively some other way.
Yeah, you said thank you for that. I'm just thinking about all of it, but particularly about what you said about mental tightness. I've never heard that before, and it is so powerful to think back about situations where I myself, and I'm guessing people listening to this live session or the replay, when they have been in highly stressful situations where they just it's like everything is blurry, right? It is like the one thing, and it's so hard to make effective decisions, to think thoroughly about something when you are when your mind is so tight about the one thing that you have in front of you. And I wonder, you have the 5 list in your list, but how can we make sense perhaps, or manage the fact that very often what is causing us stress are things that are outside of us, and they will still be there even if we go through that list of 5 things. How can we now cope with that?
Okay, right. You mean like stressors that are bothersome but beyond our control?
And they are there. You know that even if you know in your mind that even if you go through your 5 items in your list, or one of them, the lion or the bear is still in front of you, which in our case, it's work, or it's a boss telling you, hey, if you don't get me this report on time, there will be consequences. And you know that that's true whether you go through that 5 item list or
Right.
not.
So in that case, if you have a boss saying, you get me this report or else there will be consequences, that would not be the time to use the mental short list, right? The
Mm,
mental short list is to divert yourself when you're tense about a dead end topic that you have no real ability to manage effectively anymore. But if your boss
mm,
is saying, you better get me this report or else there'll be consequences, and you're feeling tense about that because the deadline feels impossible, or because there's a lot of work that has to be done, or whatever, then we would want to use that anxious energy to engage with that stressor. So we would maybe want to write out a little script of what we can say to the boss, to say, hey, look, I hear you telling me that this report has to be done or else there'll be consequences, but here's a few projects that I would have to deprioritize in order
mm,
to meet that. Do you want me to do that? Or to maybe say, I'm going to have to call in some support in order to make sure that I get this report done. So we don't go to the mental short list to escape a
mm,
problem that we should be engaging with. We only go to the mental short list when we're mentally tight about something that is really truly an outdated topic. But kind of on a somewhat related level, you're touching on, well, what if you're stressed about a topic that's real, but you can't necessarily do anything about it? In that case, the mental shortlist can be fine, or there's another technique in my book called the zone of control. And what we do with the zone of control is we divide a worry into components.
mm,
Components that we can control and components that we cannot control, right? So with the report, we might say, okay, I cannot control the fact of the deadline. Maybe you've already had that conversation with your boss and they say, look, the deadline is what it is. So I cannot control that deadline. But maybe you can control pulling in some extra people on it, or maybe you can control getting access to certain data sets, or hiring a graphic designer to at least take the design work of the report off of your plate, so that you're then when you feel tense about the topic of the report, you make sure you're only focusing on the specific parts of the report that you know fall into the controllable column. Because in the zone of control, again, we divide it into the parts that I can control and the parts I cannot control. And then
Yeah.
the parts I can control, I write a verb by each one of those
Mhm.
things, which is the action word of what can I do about it. And then when you have that gift of anxious, nervous energy, you use it to knock out those verbs, to do those
Mhm.
actions that you can do.
Oh, that is so powerful. Now, let me ask you this. All of what you're saying requires a level of commitment about one, on the one hand, managing the possibilities that anxiety gives you, and the energy of anxiety gives you to, as a springboard for, something beneficial, or coping with the dysfunctional level of anxiety. It seems that it requires a lot of discipline and awareness and intentionality. How do we create that in the first place, particularly around intentionality? How do we say, first of all, there's nothing wrong with me. Second of all, what I'm doing here is I have to be very intentional about creating, breaking down the worries, about creating the 5-item list, or any other technique that you are suggesting. How can we be very intentional about doing that, um, as
Yeah.
we face anxiety?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question, Enrique, because whenever we're acquiring new skills and new habits, there is a level of intentionality and commitment that comes up, right?
Yeah.
So that's one reason I made my book available on audiobook as well as
Thank you.
paper. Yes, because I like, especially when I'm learning new skills, to hear people talking about them and talking through them. So like while you're doing laundry or walking down the
Yeah.
street or whatever, you can just constantly expose yourself as you're trying to build a new mindset to just make it easy for yourself to get verbally cued into that mindset. Another point I discuss in the book, because there's a whole chapter on self-discipline and perfectionism, is to say, when you notice yourself, going off track and you're not doing those exercises correctly, you've lost your focus and your intentionality, and you suddenly realize that the first thing you should do is actually to congratulate yourself,
Mhm.
which sounds counterintuitive for many people. But the reason we congratulate ourselves is because awareness of the issue of having, made a mistake or gone off track is so much better than non-awareness, right? So the fact that you had the presence of mind to say, I'm going off track here. That's actually a win that you had that realization. And if you greet that awareness with compassion, you're
Mhm.
much more likely to be able to be solution focused
Mhm.
and give yourself permission to keep realizing it. If you're too hard on yourself or too perfectionist about it, you might get burnt out or even start blocking out of your own awareness when you make mistakes because it becomes too painful to confront them.
Oh, thank you for bringing the word and the concept of compassion to this conversation, right? Because once again, we are not just battling the what anxiety may do on us if we don't, take the use it as energy on the functional side of that spectrum. But at the same time, we're battling the stigma, we're battling the stereotypes, we're battling what society generally assumes about anxiety. That there's something wrong with you, and that you said it before. Yes, you will eventually, if you get to the point, you may need some professional help, but that shouldn't be the default mode, right? So, but I want to ask you this. There's a story of this. I don't know if you've heard of this fish swimming around, and there's another fish that asks them, like, "How's the water today?" And the two fish that are swimming around just swim away, and one of them says to the other, "What is water?" And the bottom line of the story is that when you are in the middle of something, in this case, water, you don't even know that you're in the water. So for them, water was a weird concept. How do you are people that don't know that anxiety is taking over them? Are people that perhaps don't know that they have higher anxiety levels than somebody else, and they may not know because they have lived that way for perhaps most of their adult lives. Is there such a thing?
I think most people who have high anxiety, at least in my experience, and again, I tend to work with higher functioning people, which usually implies a certain level of self awareness.
Mm,
So, high functioning people, that have anxiety, a lot of times they're aware of it. And in fact, on some level, there's a part of themselves that is maybe even priding themselves on an awareness that they have a higher level of conscientiousness, they have a higher level of detail orientation, double checking and follow through than other people. So they're aware of it. However, sometimes they're not always aware of quite how deep it goes for them. So there's
mm,
another exercise in my book that can be really interesting for people to try, which is called mind mapping. So what we do in that one is we take something that's making us anxious, like let's say, the big meeting tomorrow, just to stay with the same example. And we write that on a paper, big meeting tomorrow with a circle around it. And then you say, well, what are the first three things that come to mind for that? And you draw little spokes out from the circle and write each thing in its own little circle. So, maybe want to make the sale, um, feel a lot of pressure, and need to practice, right? And then you look at each one of those little bubbles and you say, now what's the first three things that comes to mind for me about that bubble? Say about need to do well. And you might find that the first thing that comes to mind on that one is what my mom always told me, or can't embarrass the family, or if I don't do well, who knows what might happen to me, right?
mm,
And then you do that for each one of those little offshoots, and then you continue doing it for all of your other offshoots until you feel like you've really tapped out everything of the map in your mind that connects to this meeting. And then you start realizing, okay, well, part of what I'm nervous about is the meeting itself, but maybe this meeting is activating and touching
mm.
other parts of myself that I'm nervous about, security, or, you know, old issues of family identity that are getting activated here. And so it's helpful for high functioning people to do that because sometimes they can be so mission oriented, so goal oriented, which is a skill in a way, but they sometimes need to take time to stop and reflect and give themselves room to see what else is going on an emotional level.
Yeah, it's what you're doing perhaps is becoming aware of all these other factors that don't have anything to do with the meeting per se, but they may be affecting your anxiety, your emotions, your response to whatever is going on in the meeting. I think that is so powerful. But now let me ask you this: uh, how can we help people understand that, or understand, or become more aware, or I'm just trying to find the way to phrase this so that they don't think that what you're telling them to do is more homework, that is more stress added on top of the stress, right? That is
Mhm.
more anxiety added on top of the anxiety. How do you approach when somebody tells you, wait a second, Dr. Chloe, you are asking me to do 20 more things than the original thing that I wanted to do. So I'm not going to do any of these things. And I'm just going to be anxious about the one thing that I was going to do in the first place. How do you approach if you get any of those reactions?
Yeah. So, first of all, I would say we all like the phrase work smarter, not harder.
Yeah.
And so for someone who's saying, "Oh gosh, I feel overwhelmed already. The last thing I need is, more to-dos here." I would say that these exercises will actually help you to use your energy more efficiently, and they'll actually make your life easier and save your time and energy. That's the whole point of
Yeah.
them. Also, I would think of it as spending quality time with yourself. This is a way of self-care. This is a way of noticing yourself and what's going on. A lot of these exercises in nervous energy, harness the power of your anxiety, are exactly the same exercises that I do with clients in my office. In fact, there's a lot of stories in the book about clients, anonymized stories, of course, about clients in my office and how they use the techniques. And so when people come to see a therapist, part of what's happening, the reason that they feel relaxed is someone's focusing on them and spending time with them and noticing them. And
Mhm.
for people to actually do that for themselves as well by, reading a book or trying some exercises or taking inventory of what's happening inside, that can actually be calming and feel like self-care.
Oh, and that's a powerful message for the workplace. Just having people to listen to you, and I'm not talking about necessarily professional help, right? I'm just talking about the one thing that may be bothering you at work that you don't have anybody to talk, or you think that there's nobody to talk with about, and just having that one person give you pay attention and listen attentively to understand with compassion. Such a powerful, it goes such a powerful way.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's a way of spending time with yourself and noticing what's going on and brainstorming how you can help yourself. There's another technique from the book called To Do List with Emotions, where we look at our to do list and then we think about what's the emotion that comes up with this. And then what is a self care behavior that I can do for myself? Like, so again, suppose that, on your to do list is, prepare notes for this big meeting tomorrow. And it feels like a big, arduous, overwhelming task. And so your emotion that goes with that is, overwhelm and even boredom, because maybe it's just kind of annoying prep work. So
Yeah.
maybe then your self-care plan is, I'm going to take my laptop to a nice restaurant bar. I'm going to order a great meal and I'm going to work on those notes while I'm enjoying a nice, really nice meal for myself. So I give myself a little distractor, a little something pleasant while I'm doing this, annoying thing, right? So it is, as you said, kind of homework. It is learning some new skills, but it really is stuff that's intended to boost you. It's for you.
Yeah, no, I like that. And by the way, I do that very often. I go when I'm bored at home, and it's the same work that I have to do at home, but I do it from a coffee shop. And just that white noise in the background of people chattering and blah blah blah. That helps me actually. It's kind of counterintuitive, but it helps me focus on what I'm doing. I don't know. I think it's a way to manage, like you said before, the emotion of, in this case, being bored working from home. But um, are there any cultural implications, like society culture implications, or perspectives on harnessing the power of anxiety? Are there any differences? Are there any specific nuances to the way people from different cultures may see this?
I'm sure there are. So, I'm not a cultural expert, so I certainly wouldn't want to overstep,
Yeah.
my area of knowledge and try to talk about cultures that I, may not understand. But I will say, as a clinical psychologist, I do know that anxiety is a universal human experience, and it does have a healthy function in every, human identity, right? This is something that's hardwired into us. The reason when we start to have anxiety that we do get a little extra adrenaline, do get a little restless sometimes, is because Mother Nature is stimulating and preparing us to take action, which again is actually a great thing if we just make sure that we know how to use it constructively to serve and take care of our needs in our communities.
Now, let me ask you this, and we are getting ready to wrap up our conversation, but I want to ask you, and I asked this in a different way before, but maybe we use it as a way to wrap up. But um, nature prepared us for this. As in, if you see a bear, you either run, you fight, or you may paralyzed by fear, whatever it is. But now it's the bear, the lion, the panther, the other thing, all of them together at the same time. Economic uncertainty, people at work being upset about something and maybe having some financial issues at home. So it's all of these things together happening at the very same time. So all the bears, all the lions, all the tigers, right in front of you. So it's a lot. how can we make sense of it all, being so many things together at the same time?
Yes. So that's a great question, Enrique. So fight, flight, or freeze, right? So my approach actually specifically has techniques for all of those. So it actually does begin with a little bit of a breathing exercise as well, because I was a yoga teacher before I was a psychologist. So on the physiological level, we have to make sure, that we're breathing. But then the techniques in the book actually kind of divide into two categories. One is about leaning in, which is the fight. Sometimes with certain panthers, we need to
Mhm.
lean in and poke them in the eyes. And some of the techniques are about pivoting away, like that mental shortlist of saying, you know what, this is not a battle that's worth my time. I need to redirect myself. And that's why I think I wanted in part to write the book, because I felt like a lot of people would have a very limited toolbox where they would say, well, if you have anxiety, you should close your eyes and think of a beach and try to relax. Or they would say, no fear. If you have anxiety, just power through it and, whatever. And I felt like we needed a more multifaceted toolbox. There's 9 techniques in the book because, like you said, sometimes we have to fight, sometimes we have to pivot, and sometimes we're just a little frozen and we need to get unlocked.
Yeah, absolutely. Dr. Chloe, this last question to very briefly to end our chat. If I know this is anxiety and harnessing the power of anxiety, the nervous energy, it's um, it's a new thing for a lot of people. And besides step number 1, which would be for them to check out your book and get it on whatever website they can buy it from.
Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart, it's everywhere.
I got mine on the audiobook because I like listening to things. So, but I want to ask you if there was one first step, other than getting the book, one first step that they can engage with right now to
Mhm.
harness the power of that nervous energy right now, something that they wouldn't even need to buy the book. Hopefully they do, but they wouldn't even need to buy the book
Yeah.
to get engaged with that one thing. What would it
Ye
be?
Absolutely. So even for free, they can go to nervousenergybook.com, and there are some videos, that they can get by sharing their email address. They can get some free worksheets and things like that at nervousenergybook.com. And I do have a favor. So, if anyone does go ahead and get the book, I would be so grateful if you would leave a review for me on Amazon, because it's incredible how much those reviews really impact the algorithm. So I just had to make that request. If anyone
Yeah.
does get the book and like it, please review.
I haven't done that, and I will do it.
Thank
Uh,
you, Enrique.
Thank you for spending this time with me, the community, for sharing all of these insights, for writing about this, bringing light to a topic that became stigma and became such a negative thing in society and especially in workplaces. And thank you for bringing a more positive, reinforcing, and an optimistic angle to people who are experiencing anxiety, and that they can harness the power of that anxiety to get things done and and do them better and grow and whatnot. So Chloe, thank you so much for being here with me. If you can stay 1 second as I turn this off so that we can say offline goodbyes, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you again, Enrique. And thank you to your wonderful global community. It's awesome to be with all of you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everybody. Stay tuned for the next events that we have in the agenda, the next live chats that we have. Lots of things going on, and I hope you continue to stay engaged. Please go and check out on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or whatever platform you use. Check out Nervous Energy from Dr. Chloe Carmichael, and I will see you all soon. Thank you so much.